was nice. Okay, so our speaker today is Barry Roberts, licensed Unity teacher and longtime member of Unity Madison. He has been a regular guest speaker and class instructor, prayer chaplain, and workshop facilitator. He now teaches part-time at the UW-Madison, although I thought you retired, but part-time, okay. And enjoys golf, hiking, dogs, music, and exploring spiritual development practices. So welcome, Barry.
Thank you, and thank you, Pete, for the world tour of music. Very nice. Before we get started in the content today, I just wanted to say thank you to, well, everyone, but especially Reverend Richard for coming here and helping us out in this transition time, and the board for committing bringing him in to do this work. And I'm really excited about what we have coming forward with Reverend Richard. So hopefully everyone will participate in these things. All right, and today we kind of kick off, as you see, our fall book study group on Unity and World Religions. It's a new book written by a Unity minister, and there's a lot of Unity centers around that are doing series and book studies on this. So as we were planning for the fall, we thought, well, this is a good one, so let's go with it, and Reverend Richard supported it, so that's what we're gonna do, is Unity and World Religions. Now, I struggled a little bit with thinking about how to do this talk, because it's like I can't go through the whole book, I can't cover everything. So what I decided to do was just to kind of bring up some key ideas that I found interesting or important in the book, just to give you a flavor for it. We're not going to do the book every Sunday from now on, we're just kicking it off today with this. The book study groups will carry on from here. So. All right, slide. So that's a picture of this, which is my pendant, which is, it's a Unity pendant. Someone from Unity years ago created this, and it's got the symbols of great world religions on it. And so you can see the cross, the Star of David, Buddhist wheel, etc. Yin, Yang, Tao. So. But the cross that's unique, it has the Unity wings across on the as the crossbar. In Unity, we for many, many years, from the beginning till, I don't know when it was, 80s, 90s, we used the winged globe as kind of the symbol, and that's what's in the middle of this. So on the Christian symbol of the cross, it's actually got the Unity wings. So I mention this because Unity as a tradition, we've always been very open and interested in all religions. And this goes back to the very beginning. Charles and Myrtle, they studied things, and it wasn't like today where we could just Google stuff and, oh wow, Wikipedia has everything. Charles attended a conference in 1893 on world religions, and he was greatly influenced by the Buddhist and Hindu teachings, and he went on and kept studying and incorporating a lot of things into Unity principles and decided whether it worked or not, and so you'll see threads of that. And in the book, one of the nice things that Reverend Roach does is he compares a lot of the different religions and our 5 basic principles. So how they're similar, how they might be different, and so forth throughout the book. So it's interesting. We've always been interested in many religious, spiritual paths in unity. Since that's what we call it, we want to bring things together because there are so many commonalities. And that's one of the biggest things that we need to do, is look for what's true and similar together instead of trying to separate and say mine is better than yours. What I believe is better than what you believe. That's not the Unity approach. It's learn anything you can to help you grow spiritually. And let's bring it together and see if it's true for us. Next slide. So one theme that Reverend Roach refers to throughout the book is what they call perennial philosophy. And it says it's the golden thread of mystical understanding, meaning a direct intuitive awareness of reality that seeks a conscious return to oneness. So that's a lot of words. Okay, but you'll get it as you go through the book. And a couple key things here. Number one, it says direct. So direct experience, direct awareness is what we teach in Unity and many religions do. It's not that we have to depend on some intermediary or someone to tell us. We can directly experience spirit and the Christ spirit and Buddha nature and all these things through our own direct experience. We don't need someone else to tell us what it is. And the other part of it is when we're in alignment with spirit, spirit is in God, it's good, and it's oneness and it's wholeness. That's the impetus that we're going towards when you're in direct experience with a spiritual source. It's always towards oneness. It's not separation. It's not divisive. It's always bringing us together. So this perennial philosophy he mentions throughout the book as a key theme that many of the religions and especially Unity bring to it. Next slide. So one of the things that's interesting and is that the three Judaism, Christianity, and Islam traditions are all kind of descended from Abraham, is the way it goes. And these are all what we call monolithic. One God exists, period. All right? So Abraham was the father of this type of thinking, that there is only one God. There's only one spiritual force in the universe. Okay, there aren't other things. We mess it up as human beings with a bunch of other stuff in our heads and our egos and our agendas and other things like that. But in terms of spirit, there's only one. And these are all based on that. And one of the things is, if you really believe it, the story of Abraham supposedly he's actually the father to about 500,000 Jews, 2 billion Christians, and 1 billion Muslims around the world. I'd like to see someone do the genealogy, but that would probably take a while. That would probably take quite a while for that to happen. But the concept is, it all grew out of the same stuff and from the same place. And we can look for the similarities and what we have in common, or we can look for this divisiveness. And one of the things that we need to do is to understand within each of these, all traditions, it doesn't matter what they are, there's a lot of variation. So there's the core teachings, and then there's people taking things off into other places. And you can see that in all these. I mean, there are Christian extremists, okay, right? There's Muslim extremists, okay? And all over. That's the way we interpret these things and move these things. So when we want direct experience, part of it is to check it, that we're really doing the heart-centered spiritual thing, not just listening to our ego or someone else's ego. And we have a lot more in common when you look at just the spiritual parts than getting into all the political, economic, social kinds of things. You know, it reminds me back in well, it's not funny, but, you know, the Northern Ireland violence years ago with Protestants and Catholics and so forth, and, you know, different things people said about that. Well, they weren't fighting over the interpretation of the Bible, okay? It was socioeconomic kinds of things. It really had nothing to do with theology. And in fact, I remember one leader, a Protestant leader, said, well, Jesus Christ was a Protestant. What? I mean, that didn't even happen until 1,000 years later, that there was the division that created that. So I'm like, okay. But these are the kinds of things that can get interpreted in different ways, and that's why we want you to directly check it out and know that it's true for you. Okay. Next. Who is this? Gandhi, yes. And for us in the West, he's probably the most visible Hindu leader, okay? And he's Hindu. But he's real interesting too, because while he was a great Hindu spiritual leader, he was not trained as like a Hindu priest or anything. You know, he was a lawyer. And he applied the spiritual principles to social justice. And that's what his whole life was about, creating social justice in alignment with the Hindu principles and other principles. He was open to many traditions too, and in fact, it says here in the book that Gandhi began each day reading selected passages from the the Gita, and the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, so he always read the Sermon on the Mount along with the Hindu texts, because he believed that not everything could be provided in one place and that a lot of things had value. Okay. Now, I don't have a great understanding of Hinduism, but part of what is different than the Judaism, Christianity, Islam, monolithic is there's a lot of gods and symbols and things in Hinduism. So, next slide. This, anyone know who this is? Ganesha, yes. And he's a Hindu god, and known as the remover of obstacles. And this is actually a wall hanging that I have that I took a picture of. And this thought that's up on the slide is the one thing that really struck me, because I just couldn't quite get in my head this idea of all these gods and how all that worked together and things. But this statement that God is formless but takes many forms is kind of a Hindu philosophy. So it's not that there's all these gods, it's all expressions of the one expressing in different creative ways. And they use the symbology and the different, you know, Ganeshas, and there's many others, to help describe and apply the spiritual of the one formless. So to me that made sense, because I didn't really make a lot of sense out of just having all these gods running around doing things. That just didn't make a lot work for me. But so it helped me understand Hinduism in a different way that was very helpful. Next, who is this? The Dalai Lama, Buddhist, right? So we've studied his books here, and he's been to Madison and so forth, and a lot of people have met him, and you know, he's a great leader. He's, again, someone that we know in the West as a key for Buddhism. Next slide. So a few things about Buddhism. I have mentioned to people back during the lockdown era of the pandemic and things that for about a year I did a lot of online study with a Buddhist center based in Madison. And it was really interesting in a lot of ways. And these are three key points that are made in the book about Buddhism. One is that he says it's a systematic and insightful spiritual psychology. And it really is. I mean, the psychology, they treat it very scientific and has many teachings about how to use our brains and our minds in different ways, through meditation, but through other things also. It's like getting a PhD in our third unity principle of the law of mind action. It's like, who's in charge of my mind? How do I use it? And what are ways I can develop it and make it positive so that I let go of suffering and am free for full happiness? There's many techniques, and it works if we actually apply these things. I know some people have mentioned to me that they thought I seemed more relaxed and I sweat less and things like that. But I always sweat. One of the things is, I'm always running hot, so that's the way it is. But in my talks, basically this year, I've had numerous people tell me these things. And you know why? Because I had one of these Buddhist principles I really took to task and really apply in my mind, and it made a difference. So even us old farts can learn. Yay! Yay! It's never too late, and it's never too early to start either. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait. So there's a lot that we can learn, and then also that Buddhists consider it non-theistic. They don't, in fact, I asked a Buddhist monk a number of years ago at a conference about God, and he goes, well, Buddhists don't believe in God. I was like, oh, what? So it didn't quite make sense to me, but he meant in the traditional way a lot of Christians and others look at God as something separate and some separate entity and so forth. They don't believe in any separate entity type of thing, and so that's fine. But they do believe in spiritual development and consciousness and all those kinds of things. So it's just not a separate God entity that they worship or go to. So it's an interesting thing of applying, and the teacher here that I had, she always mentioned, you don't have to be Buddhist to apply these things, You don't have to be Buddhist to learn these things. This is a science of how our mind works and how energy works and all that. You can apply it. So I encourage people to do that also. And there's many people in Unity that have some connection with Buddhism too. Now, what is religion, really? It's really our human attempt to try and put words and ideas to something that we can't see, and we can't really put words and ideas to it fully, right? I mean, it's really difficult to say in language and ideas, what is God? What is spirit? What is the universe? What is Mother Nature? And that's what all religions are trying to do, is put it into some language that we as human beings can understand and work with in a positive way. He says historians have looked, and they estimate there's been 100,000 different religions in human history. That's a lot of interpretation. That's a lot of interpretation. And it can go a lot of different ways. And it's okay, because people are trying to get to the spiritual core. Remember that perennial philosophy? If you're really following spirit, you're moving towards oneness. And that's true for all of these. Now, we also don't want to forget other funny things. Next slide. Who is this? Jeff Bridges, the dude. That's right. And on page 150, the last tradition that he talks about is the dudism. Seriously. Dudism is a religion or lifestyle inspired by the dude, the protagonist in the 1998 film, The Big Lebowski, Jeffrey, you know. So Buddhism is a religion or movement or philosophy that sees qualities as admirable with its combination of hippie ideals, Taoism, Buddhism, teachings of Jesus, along with viewpoints of Epicurus and New Age beliefs. And actually, there's 450,000 Buddhist priests. I don't know where they got the priest training, but you know, whatever works. Again, humor can be part of our learning and effort to connect with God and spirit. So, next slide. And he wraps up by talking about where are we going in the future, and these are just kind of my thoughts based on the themes of the book. Number one, we want direct experience, trust direct experience. We want to trust our hearts and minds versus an intermediary, someone that says they have a higher path to God than you do. No, nobody does. We all are the same. We're all spiritual beings. We all have the same connections. Some people, you know, believe they have a higher connection. There's priests, ministers, others that feel you have to go through them to get the right word, to get the right meaning. Well, some people believe that, some people don't. In Unity, we believe in direct experience. And again, following spiritual teachings instead of dogma. All right? Dogma and a lot of, quote, religious traditional practices are used to control people and to try and dominate things. Now, also, the same rituals and things can be looked at a very different way. I had a friend who was an Episcopal priest, and he just loved the rituals. And to him, it was like a meditation. It was like it got him, his own connection with God and with spirit was enriched by the rituals. Other people just kind of say stuff and they don't really get into it. But so it depends how you look at it. But we don't teach dogma in Unity. We teach principles, we learn, we want people to grow and understand it themselves. We also focus on oneness, which is part of that perennial philosophy that he mentions, versus separation. How are we similar? We're all on the same path, and we are all one together. And ultimately, where is religion going to go? It depends on us, right? Where do we bring it? Which of these things do we focus on? How do we bring it into our lives? How do we share it with other people? How do we make change? Like Gandhi made change, and Dalai Lama has made change, and other people make change. How do we make change in the world for the good and for the oneness? That's up to all of us. And that's where we're going to go, depending on what we choose. Now, it's also easy to kind of choose one thing, then choose another thing, then think that thing's good, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to end with this little story in the book where he tells, there's a story about a man who was stranded on a desert island for many years. He was finally rescued by a pilot in a seaplane. As he and the pilot were flying above the island, the pilot looked down to see 3 houses. And he says, "I thought you were alone." "Oh, yes," said the castaway. "The first house is my home. The second house is my church." "Well, what's the third house?" inquired the pilot. "Oh, that's the church I used to attend." So, anyways, we are kicking off the book groups. There is a sign-up sheets that will be coming around during the weekend update. There's also a study guide and copies of those out in the foyer. And to wrap it up, since it is football season, and this was billed as the kickoff to the book groups. So this is a time in our service where we take a few minutes to be still and go within. So I invite you to just get comfortable. Close your eyes if you wish, or gaze down. And just breathe naturally, peacefully. And feel waves of relaxation with every breath. You're feeling more relaxed, more clear. More at peace as you breathe. And now I'd like you to imagine that you're walking in a meadow and there is a mountain ahead of you. And this looks like a gorgeous mountain to hike up. And you see a path. And you take that path. And as you start hiking up the mountain, you see other people are taking the path with you. And as you go up the mountain, you look to the left and you see another path. And there's people on that path going up the mountain. And you look to the right and there's another path with people going up the mountain. And you continue your journey and you see there's paths and people all hiking up this mountain from different directions. People who look different, sound different, act different. But they're all moving in the same direction up to the height of the mountain. And as you approach the top, you see the light, the bright white light glow of the mountaintop. And when you reach the mountaintop, you walk into the light. And others from other paths are walking into the light at the mountaintop. Many, many, many people. And there's enough room for all of us in the light. There are many paths, many ways to get to the light. And we share in that from all traditions, from all colors and creeds. When we choose to climb this mountain, to be one in the light. We are at peace, we are whole, and we are one in spirit. And now let us take a moment in the silence to just feel this energy and feel the love of this oneness. And now, as you gently come back, you feel a sense of gratitude and peace and happiness, because you know in your heart this light is in you and in everyone. And this is why we're here, to express the light that we all are to our fullest potential, for ourselves and for all other beings. We bring the light and the love through our human expression. And for all of this, we are grateful. Amen.